We are live. Okay. Just to let everybody know that we're going to open the meeting now, but we're going to have to adjourn for about 30 minutes after we open because we're waiting for a panel member to get down here. Otherwise, I'd like to call this session of the board provision to order, knowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Innu, and Dakota peoples, and the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our Treaty Water comes to Shoal Lake 41st Nation Treaty 3 territory. With me today will be Ron Merritt and Cynthia Stevens. My name is Harvey Diamond. The City Assessment Department is represented by Stephen Lubinstein, and our recording secretary is Belhan Rojo. To the Zoom participants of the hearing, please note that you are placed in the waiting room until your property is called upon. When it's your turn, you will be admitted to the meeting. Kindly follow along on the City of Winnipeg's Border Division YouTube channel for the hearing process. Once the host admits you into the hearing, please close or mute your YouTube player and then be permitted to speak with respect to your property. Once your hearing is concluded, you can leave the meeting. We'll be hearing the application revision of the assessment rules in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested are described in each application. We will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony. Anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Please be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are considered as evidenced by the Board of Division. The Board of Division is appointed annually by Council, Superintendent Abed, and the City Administration. It makes its decision based on the evidence provided at the hearing and issues written order to be mailed to all participants as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board that pertains to assessed value or to classification, or to the Court of King's Bench that pertains to an application for exemption from taxation. And should a party wish to appeal, the information to do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by any questions. Each side will be given an opportunity to summarize and wish to do so. Once all the evidence upon an application has been brought forward, that when they leave, the person will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all questions have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make decisions. We receive the board's order decision by written mail as soon as possible. Added information, all public records will have streamed, recorded, and will form part of a public record. Until we'll be hearing items 2 and 4 through 8 on the docket today. And Ms. Rojo, you can please affirm the first applicant's testimony and our assessor.
Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
Stephen Lobenstein.
And you affirm the evidence you're about to present is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Applicant, Mr. Van Bruggen, please state your full name.
Thank you. Wesley Van Bruggen.
And you affirm the evidence you're about to present is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Thank you.
Thank you. And Grayson, I believe that's your name. Please state your full name.
Good morning, Grayson Sharples.
And you affirm the evidence you're about to present is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to adjourn for approximately half an hour, maybe as much as that, but we'll let you know. As soon as our board member gets here, we'll go back live again. Sorry about the convenience.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We are live. Thank you. Good morning. I understand that 80 Hanger Line Road has been withdrawn, so we'll proceed with agenda item number 2, which is 100 Hanger Line Road. And Mr. Rubenstein, when you're ready, you can proceed.
Sure. The roll number is 0704219630 100 Hanger Line Road. The assessed value is $2,048,000. There's one building with one story and one premise. The actual year built and the effective year built is 1996. It has a wall height of 31 feet. The zoning is M2. We have a land area of 50,723 square feet, and the gross floor and leasable area are 12,000 square feet for a land to plan of 4.23. So carrying down or moving down to my page 2, you can see a map of where the subject property is located. This is in the airport area. It is just north of Ness Avenue, behind the Assiniboine Golf course there. It is part of the airport, so it does have tarmac access. On my page 3, you can see an overhead view of the subject property. You can see where the tarmac access is highlighted in the pink lines there behind the property. Going down to my page 3 further, the second picture, you can see the hangar doors that adjust to allow planes to move in and out of this property. And also on my page 4, you can see the front view of the subject property where the parking is. So we're going to go to my page 6 first and look at the income for this property, the model income. As you can see, we're using a leasable area of 12,000 square feet. We're using a model rent of $10.17 per square foot. The vacancy we're applying is 3.5%, and our expenses are 3% with a shortfall of $3.85 per square foot. This will generate a net operating income, a modeled net operating income, of $112,619. We're using an overall capitalization rate of 5.5%. When we apply that capitalization rate to our net operating income, we get a capitalized value of $2,048,000 rounded. So our model is based off the market. So our model rents here at $10.17 a square foot is supported on my page 5. So on page 5, we're looking for rents that are in a similar location, similar type of age. The lease term should be at market, and also the size or the area of the building should be similar to the subject property. So here we have comparables on Border, Dublin, King Edward, Notre Dame, and St. James. They're all in a very similar area to the subject property. They're all in the St. James area in close proximity to the airport, although yes, they do not have tarmac access like the subject property does. You can see the lease starts are fairly recent, ranging from 2018 to 2020, and the lease terms range from 3 months all the way up to 10 years. The leased areas are very similar to the subject property in that they range from 9,464 square feet all the way up to 16,000 square feet. The wall heights are a little smaller than the subject property. That's pretty evident in the fact that they have to bring airplanes in and out of this particular building. So we're looking at wall heights ranging between a low of 18 feet and a high of 28 feet. The effective year builds are fairly close to what the subject property is, for 1996. So we have 2000 as a high and 1975 as a low. Obviously, there's 1991 and 1990 and 1986, which are very close as well to the same year as the subject property. Just excuse me for a second. The net rents, which support our net rent of $10.17 a square foot, range from as low as $9 to as high as $10.50 a square foot. So moving to my page 8, this is our capitalization chart. Industrial is second from the top. You can see that the 20th to 80th percentile range from 5.5 to 7.45. So the majority of the properties in the city of Winnipeg are within this range. As I noted, this property is at 5.50, so it's just outside the range. It's on the lower end, but it's still very close to the 20th to the 8th percentile. It'd be just outside its range, pretty much due to its age. It's a fairly new building in Winnipeg for Winnipeg standards at 1996, and it's at 12,000 square feet. It's not an overly large building either. There is a mailer for this building. They're indicating, that's on my page 10, they're indicating that it is owner occupied, although they're saying there is a gross income. So I'm not 100% sure on what they mean by that. They do list some tenants with some monthly rents, but they don't break down their leased areas. So that being said, I feel that the value of $2,048,000 is fair and equitable and should be confirmed. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Van Bruggen, if you have any questions to the assessor, or if you, or if your cohort has any questions, you can ask them now. Just don't ask questions at the same time.
Certainly. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. If we can turn to page 10, please. Or I guess maybe actually scratch that. Let's start on page 11, please.
Okay.
So you mentioned that this is located on the Winnipeg airport, and there's you'd agree that there's a lease in place for the property?
Yes, there would be a lease, a land lease for the property.
And if we can turn to page 10, just go back a page. That land lease is $50,000 a year, correct?
Yep, correct.
So based on the fact that they would have some additional expenses, what impact do you think that would have on the overall value of the property?
I don't think that's going to have an overall impact on the property. I think land leases in this area are obviously common. When you're on the airport property, you have to have a land lease. This is basically sort of the price they pay to have access to the tarmac. So having access to the tarmac is a positive for this building.
So any of the leases on page 5 that you presented, are any of those land lease properties? Would they have a land lease?
I mentioned none of them were on the airport property, no.
Okay, so none of them would have a land lease then in place, correct?
Correct.
Okay, all right. I think that concludes my questions. Mr. Sharples, do you have any questions?
I have no questions.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Stevens, do you have any questions?
I just want about the cap rate. I mean, you mentioned 1996 is a new building for Winnipeg. That
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll comment on that. In terms of the industrial buildings in Winnipeg, and I'm talking of industrial, 1996 is actually a fairly new stock for Winnipeg. Winnipeg, the majority of Winnipeg's buildings have been built between, I'd say, 1940 and 1980, maybe into 1988. So actually, a 1996 build is relatively recent for Winnipeg.
But would it be a building that is still at that age? Would it be normal for the? I'm assuming this was model driven. Would it be normal for the model to put it outside of your percentile range?
No, I think I commented on also like the size of the building at 12,000 square feet. It's not an overly large building. So that would also, there's a little less risk when you have a larger or a smaller building and a larger building.
Okay, and something like the land lease on the property, the model would be taking that into account, or yes or no?
No, the model would not be taking that into
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you. That's all I had. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, any questions?
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
So, Mr. Lucien, I'm looking at the disclosure, and it does indicate the land lease has a cost of $50,000. And it also shows that they had total income of $255,700 and expense of $108,000, which the expenses are all, part of which is interest of $36,000, which I don't think would usually be included, or property taxes for that matter, maybe, I'm not sure. But in any event, so they've got and basically to subtract that, they have a higher NOI than your model shows.
Yeah, I think I commented, I'm not 100% sure on this mailer. And because, so they checked off owner occupied, but they said they have a rental income. So I'm not 100% sure on what's going on here.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
The way I read it says total rent income of $255,700.
Yeah.
Expenses of $108,000, which would include interest of $36,000, which you can't count. Basically, the $36,000 would take out most of the land lease if that were something we'd look at. I'm assuming.
Yeah. Well, I mean, simply just looking at it, you are correct in how you would calculate that NOI. But I have some questions about if this is.
I'll ask that question to Mr. Van Bruggen. He's
sure.
Okay, that's the questions. Then thank you. So, Mr. Van Bruggen, when you're ready, you can proceed.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. If the board will turn with me to page 3, please, we'll get started. And just let me know when you're there.
I'm here.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much. As mentioned, the subject property is a 12,000 square foot airplane hangar constructed in 1999. It's being assessed as a storage warehouse using the income approach to value. The property has been assessed at a value of $2,048,000. M&P is requesting a value of $1,760,000 for the property. The board will turn with me to page 4. Page 4, we have the income for assessment information for the property. This has been collected from the City of Winnipeg website. This is just basically showing the civic address there. You can see that the property use code is airport, and the assessed land area is 1.2 acres. Page 3, we have a requested value for this particular property. So for the requested value, M&P is looking at an adjustment to the rental rate for the property. The property has been assessed with a potential income of $122,040. M&P is requesting a potential income of $108,000. The vacancy rate has been left the same. Expense allowance has been left the same. Net income shortfall has been left the same. The capitalization rate, the property has been assessed with a capitalization rate of 5.5%. M&P is requesting a capitalization rate of 5.65% to arrive at that estimated or the requested market value of $1,760,000. Page 6 and 7 will contain the valuation breakdown for this particular property, just showing the income parameters that have been used by the municipality. Page 8 provides a map. This is from the City of Winnipeg's assessment website. Again, just showing that this is within the airport there. And then page 9, we have a satellite map, just showing again the location of the property, as well as some exterior photos on page 10. Again, just showing showing some pictures of the warehouse. If the board will turn with me to page 11. On page 11, we have the start of our valuation. So the property was purchased by the owner in November of 2019. Now, unfortunately, when we had contacted the owner, or when we started the process, we were unable to get, we only have information of an email from the owner indicating that they had purchased the property November 2019 for $1.8 million. We did go back and ask for some additional documentation, the sales form to show, or any documentation to show that purchase. However, unfortunately, the person who does have that information, it was away and has been away for a little bit, so we were unable to get that. So there was a bit of a search to see if we could gather more documentation so we could present to the board. Unfortunately, it was a function of the person who has it. It's in their email. So this is kind of the best we have. So I will leave the board with that. Just want to provide a little bit more color around why why we don't have the sales document there for the board. Second point would be the rental rate. So if the board turns with me to page 12. So on page 12, we have some discussion on the rental rate. As mentioned, the property has been assessed with a rental rate of $10.17 per square foot. M&P is has analyzed asking rents using similar industrial properties with M2 zoning and high ceiling wall heights. You can see in the table below that we've identified 4 rents. The ceiling heights range from about 26 feet to 28 feet. We have M2 zoning across the board. And the asking rates for these properties range from $7.75 to $11.81. When we take a look at these, we've looked at an average and a median just to try to get, because again, each property has its own nuances. They are a little bit smaller than the subject property. The subject property is 12,000 square feet. The properties that we're looking at range from 7,200 square feet to just a little over 10,500 square feet. So as you can see here, with that average of $8.75, median of $8.13, in looking at these properties, it would be M&P's position that a reasonable rental rate would be $9 per square foot. So understanding that the property has a slightly higher clear wall height than some of the comparables that we're using, as well as that 1996 year of construction on that property. So we feel that a $9 rental rate would be reasonable based on the leasing that we're seeing within the market. If the board can turn with me to page 13. On page 13, we provided provided some comparable sales to be used and looked at for the property. So as mentioned, the property has been assessed at a value of $171 per square foot. This is a 30.03% increase from the previous assessment cycle. And now, although there have not been a lot of sales of airport hangars, we have identified some similar properties within the market that we feel would be good comparables. We provided them in the table below there. So you can see that we have 4 properties. The first one is 1561 Clarence. So this property sits on 0.92 acre parcel of land. Year of construction is 2004. Very similar in terms of size of building at 12,480 square feet. It sold in November 2019 for 155 a square foot. Then we have the subject property at 100 Hanger Line. Again, similar as previously mentioned. This property is purchased for $1.8 million in November 2019. That equates to a value of $150 per square foot for that. We have 560 Marjoram. This property was constructed in 2005, 15,000 square feet. So very similar in terms of square footage as well compared to the subject property. Sold May 2019 for $143 a square foot. And then finally we have 1331 Niagara Road, Niagara East. This property was constructed in 2007, 15,000 square feet, sold for $142 a square foot. So when we take a look at each one of these sales, again, it does suggest that assessed value of $171 per square foot is a little high, and that an adjustment would be warranted for these properties. The board can turn with me to page 4. On page 4, we have our capitalization rate study. So as mentioned, the property has been assessed with a capitalization rate of 5.5%. So using the sales that we've identified in the previous section, we've calculated what a capitalization rate would be for these properties. Now, unfortunately, we don't have, for most of the properties, we don't actually have the leasing or the information, or they tend to be owner occupied. So we're taking a look at what we feel a reasonable rental rate for these properties would be. We're using a $9 rental rate for the properties, a 3.5% vacancy rate, expenses of 3%, operating costs of $3.85 to arrive at a calculated net operating income. Using this net operating income, we're dividing that by the purchase price to arrive at what our calculated capitalization rate would be. So again, one of the challenges would be, some of these are, as mentioned, owner occupied, and then for other ones, we just don't have the leasing. So we have to kind of make a guess, an educated guess based on what we think these properties would lease for in the market. Given that they're all kind of the newer buildings, very similar in terms of size, for this property, we feel that requested rate of $9 per square foot that we're making for the subject property would be reasonable when applying. If the board moves with me to page 15, we have our conclusion. So here again, we've taken a look at the property, we've taken a look at the value. It's our position that a requested rental rate of $9 per square foot would be reasonable. A requested capitalization rate of 5.65% would be reasonable, resulting in that estimated market value of $1,760,000 for that property. Page 16, 17, 18 are just supporting documentation. Starting on page 20, if the board can just turn with me there, we have the lease comparables that we've used when looking at the properties, some just pictures of what those properties look like. So we have the first one at 1725 St. James Street. Then on page 20, we have, or bottom of page 20, we have 1130 King Edward Street. Page 21, we have 301 DeBeat Street. And then page 21, or bottom of page 21, we have 955 Lajmodi Boulevard. Page 22, we have the rent. We just have that support, so we have the rent comparables there for 1130 King Edward, 1725 St. James, 301 DeBeat. So you can see here that those properties range 1977 to 2013. So obviously some newer properties there. And then page 23, we have the 955 Lajmodi, the asking rate there for that property. Page 24, we have the sales comparables. So here you can see that we've taken a look. We're trying to find newer properties, similar style of building to the subject property that we're looking at. So we have 1561 Clarence. Then we have 100 Hanger Line, as mentioned, the subject property on the bottom of page 24. Page 25, we have 560 Marjoram. So again, a newer building. And then finally on page 25, we have 1331 Niagara. Starting on page 26, continuing on until page 31, we just have the supporting documentation from the Johnson report for 3 of those 4 sales that we had indicated, just in case there are questions about that. And then starting on page 33, moving until page 55, are just the documentation, just the documents from the City of Winnipeg Assessment Department regarding income-producing properties. with that, I conclude my presentation, and I welcome any questions from the city or from the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Livingston, any questions?
Just sorry, which, I guess on your page 5, so you're going by the income approach, not by the cost approach. That's how you're valuing the property.
Right. Yeah. So we're using the sales comparison approach to see what sales are selling for, and just to see what the value, if does that value line up with what's typical for the market for these types of properties. But we are using an income approach when coming up with a value for the property.
Okay. Those are all my questions.
Thank you. Smith, do you have any questions?
Sorry, did you ask me, Harvey?
I asked Ron first. Oh, I'm sorry.
Wesley, you asked me a couple questions here. In your cap rate, you have got the subject property, and you have a date of 01/11/22. Isn't that post-reference?
You know what? That is absolutely a mistake on our part. The property sold in November 2019. So if you look at page 11, it's November 2019. So that was just a mistake, keying error on our part as we were putting it in. I'm sorry about that.
So to follow up in regards to the sale, you had mentioned that there wasn't a lot of information, but was it a listed property, or was it a private sale? Do you know?
So my understanding was that the property had been, so they were going to list the property. So this is the property right beside 80 Hangar. So the same owner who owns 80 Hangar also purchased 100 Hangar. So they had purchased this property. They had right of first refusal. They had wanted to buy the property, and they were incentivized to come in. In talking to the general manager, he had said they came in with a value that would, because they didn't want a competitor to buy it. So they came in with a value that they thought was a couple $100,000 higher than what the property would be selling for in an open market. Because they were incentivized, because they needed that property, they didn't want anyone else to get it.
Just one other thing, and that is in regards to your cap rates that you developed on for comparables. These are hypothetical numbers then?
Yeah.
They're not true NOI facts, but you've assumed certain things to develop a cap rate.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah. So for a couple of the properties, they're owner occupied, and 2 of the properties, 1561 Clarence and 560 Marjoram. Unfortunately, we don't have. We're unable to get the income information for those properties. So it's just kind of a question of us trying to do our best with the information we have available. In looking at the properties, we're kind of right around the same size as the subject property, same year of construction of the subject property. Based on the information available, if a rent of $9 is reasonable for the subject property, we felt that would be a conservative request when applying to it. The same thing with this applied vacancy rates. We tried to be reasonable and applied what would be typical for the market when we're looking at that.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Cindy, do you have any questions?
Just one, just to follow up on your comment when you were answering Mr. Merritt's question about the sale. So, because you have valued the property at less than what you've indicated it sold for, and so is that your contention that it's because they overpaid given they were incentivized to buy it? Is that your position?
Yeah, so in talking to the general manager, he had indicated that they had right of first refusal, but they were also very motivated to make sure they got the property just for business purposes and to make sure a competitor wasn't taking up space beside them. So they came in and they paid. The number he said was $200,000 to $300,000 more than what market was. However, when we're taking a look at this, we were taking a look at part of the reason we came in a little lower is just because we are looking at other properties that have transacted within the market to see what they would be valued at as well. So it's more so just saying what else is selling in the market and what would that be impactful for in terms of value?
Okay, and just to confirm, this didn't go onto the open market. The sale happened between the seller and the buyer privately.
So I was told my understanding is they had right of first refusal on it. I don't know if they ever did end up getting it listed, if it ever did end up getting listed, or how that process went. I can only speak to the fact that they, or how they became aware of the listing. I can only speak to the fact that they found out that it was going to be available. They wanted to buy it. They came in with an aggressive offer to make sure they lined it up. But beyond that, unfortunately, I can't. I'm
Okay.
not sure more.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. That's all I had. Thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah, so Ms. Van Bruggen, just to go on to Ms. Stevens was asking, if they had a right of first refusal, that means they can match any other offer and they get it. So why would they offer more than somebody else? Because they could get it for whatever else was offered.
My understanding in terms of so I'm not sure. Unfortunately, Mr. Chair, I can't speak to the structure of how that right of first refusal was structured. I can only speak to what the information I was provided. They had indicated that because they had that right of first refusal, they wanted to make sure they got that property. So that's why they came in with an aggressive bid. Beyond that, unfortunately, I really can't give more details. I'm unaware of any more information about how that's structured.
I'm just going to say, Michael, that a right of first refusal gives you the right to match any other offer. So it doesn't add up that they would offer more to make sure nobody else made another offer that they can match.
Again, that's...
Anyway, you answer the best you can. You don't need to know what's been done. The next thing I have to say is, I know we're using the income approach, but you try to develop cap rates here. And doing so, you assume rental rates of $9 a foot.
Correct.
Foot. But in fact, if the rental rates were $10 a square foot, which could be, we don't know, you're just assuming it's 9, you'd have a lower cap rate, wouldn't you?
No, so the cap rate would go up, right? Because they would have more income, and they would be, so the NOI, if the higher cap rate, if there were more rental rate, that would be a higher NOI, resulting in a higher capitalization rate.
Not if you took the sale price, though.
Sorry?
Okay, you'd have a higher NOI.
Yep.
Okay, leave it with me. And none of your comparable properties, a lot of them are pretty far from the airport, and none of them are on tarmac, correct?
That's correct. So the only one would be unfortunately, there's, it's not, the hangars don't typically sell. So we do have that sale at the 1.8 million. But then beyond that, just tried to make sure, we felt that it was more important to try to get newer properties when we're looking at comparable properties, and try to get a similar in terms of structure and style. So we took a little bit of a broader approach when identifying comparable properties within the city, to determine what an appropriate, what they're selling for on a per square foot basis.
If you look at the disclosure that was in the assessor's brief.
Sorry, which page am I looking at?
Well, not on the assessor's brief now, but it was there. The annual disclosure that was made by the.
Oh, okay. Yep.
And it indicated that there was rental income and then expenses, and part of those expenses included interest. That would normally not be an allowable deduction.
Yes, that would be correct. So it is our understanding that this is fully owner occupied. They are running this for their business. Unfortunately, I can't speak to why they put interest on there, and I would agree that interest would not be typically considered an expense.
Anyway, their NOI would be a lot higher than the one you formulated, because of what the city has. When you take into account the higher amount of income, and if you deduct the expenses, you have a much higher NOI than you formulated.
Yeah, I mean, again, because it's owner occupied, we probably wouldn't put a lot of weight on it. Typically, the rental rate that they're recording would be more of an accounting entry, and less so what they would be able to achieve within the market. That's how we would look at it. I wouldn't really give it much consideration, to be perfectly honest. But I agree that you would be that if you calculate it that way, that the net operating income would be higher.
And did you discuss that disclosure with your client?
No, so I didn't, it was an owner occupied building, and I don't typically put a lot of weight in terms of rental income outlined from owner occupied buildings.
You saw the brief of the assessors, so you didn't discuss it with your client.
No, so we saw the brief, we saw the income, again, because it is owner occupied and was indicated as owner occupied. We didn't think that there's going to be a lot of weight put on it. We were more concerned more so in terms of the purchase price for that property and trying to get some more documentation.
Okay, well, that answers all my questions. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
So we'll consider this and you'll hear from us.
Oh, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure if it had been provided, there is a rebuttal brief that was sent in yesterday.
Yes.
Okay.
Got it. I'm going to move it in right now.
Okay,
And I'll
we'll get that.
Okay, it is in there now, and I'm adding it to the OneDrive as well. Okay, that one has been uploaded.
Okay, we have a rebuttal.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Am I good to go?
Sorry, I haven't received it yet. Can you email it to me, please?
Yeah, you should have it now.
Bellum, can you send it to me as well? It's not showing up on mine either. Sorry.
All right. Download it again.
Okay, I have it.
Okay, I've sent it to you again.
I've got it. Thank you.
Okay, we'll now have it.
Everyone has perfect.
Okay, Ms. Van Bergen, go ahead.
Thank you very much. If we can move to page 3, and just let me know when you're there.
Okay.
Thank you. So what MMP has done is we've taken the leases from the assessment department, as well as the leases are provided by the assessor, as well as the leases that MMP has utilized when looking at this property, and just combine them to see what the impact of the combined leases would be. When we combine all the leases together, so that would be the 5 leases from the assessor, the 4 leases from MMP, we still arrive at an average of $9, we arrive at an average rate of $9.28 and a median of $9. So as mentioned, the leases highlighted in green were the comparables provided by the respondent. When we take a look at all of these, again, we feel that this just supports our requested rental rate of $9 as we had initially requested. So again, that concludes my presentation. I welcome any questions from the city or from the board. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Livingston, any questions?
Just saying, so I guess the only question I have is, so you're putting a lot of weight on our on the city's comparables.
So so what we're saying is when we take a look at our leasing, we arrived at a rental rate that we felt was reasonable at $9. When we combine in the city's leasing, we still arrive at a median rental rate of $9, which still reflects supports what we had initially requested. So either way, however you look at it, that overall requested rate of $9 seems pretty reasonable.
Okay, those are my questions.
Steve, any questions?
No questions on the rebuttal. Thank you.
Any questions?
No, Mr. Diamond, thank you.
Okay. Ms. Van Bruggen, so I'm looking at the comparables and I noticed that the city's comparables all have rents of the lowest is $9, the highest is $10.50. They're all in the vicinity of the airport. Yours have rental rates, I know a high of $11.81, but a low of $6.95, $7.75, and $8.50. So it looks to me that the average and median both could shoot downward by your comparables and not by the cities, which would raise them. Do you agree?
Yeah, so I agree the cities are probably in a slightly closer vicinity. Some of them, there's certainly some of ours, 1725 St. James, 1130 King Edward, that would be located within the area. Those are the rents at $7.75 and $8.50. Certainly the property for 955 Lash Modier and 301 DeBeats would be located a little bit further away. But again, I think when we do look at those St. James and King Edwards properties, they would be reasonable. They would be in reasonably close proximity as well to be considered. So, and we can see that both of those rents are under the $9 mark.
We'll have to consider what we think to be the better comparables, because it comes down, I think, largely to that and some cap rates.
Sorry.
I was just surmising that, we have to decide which are the better comparables, and that's what we're here. So this is what it comes down to, I think.
Certainly.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you very much. Again, we'll consider all this evidence and we'll arrive at our decision and we'll send it out in due course. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we can now go on with our next property at number 4, which is 614 Ferry Road. Marcel?
There. Go. How are you this morning? Good. Nope.
I forgot it's Barry and then 35.
It's 2 units already.
Would you please state your full name? And you affirm the evidence about present truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Verrill, for waiting for your Okay, so we're next dealing with 614 Ferry Road, and Ms. Liberty, will you ready to proceed?
Yeah. So the roll number is 0704207100, 614 Ferry Road. The assessed value is $2,730,000. I do have a verbal recommendation for $2,402,000. So that's $2,402,000.
Mr. Navarro, is that acceptable to you?
It is.
Okay, if you maybe just let us know how you arrived at that, Ms. Littleson?
Sure. I arrived at it by just increasing the cap rate to 6.25%. We took a look at this building. It's an interesting construction for a industrial building. It's got 2 floors on it. Both floors span the plan of the building, and they're both just 11 feet wall height. So it's a pretty atypical building for the industrial market.
Okay, so you felt it deserved a higher cap rate.
Correct.
And what was that cap rate again? I didn't put it down, sorry.
6.25.
Thank you. Are any questions?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Stevens, do you have any questions?
No questions, thank you.
And I don't either, so thank you very much. So we'll go on then to item number 5, which is 1935 Sargent Avenue. And Mr. Nicholson, you ready?
Excuse me. Okay, so the roll number is 0704218000, 1935 Sargent Avenue. We have an assessed value of $11,276,000. I have another verbal recommendation for this property. It's reducing the assessed value to $10,439,000. That's $10,439,000.
Okay. And how was that arrived at?
Oh, by reducing the rental rate to $7.
Mr. Vero, is that acceptable?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions, Mr. Merritt?
Yes, the cap rates are exactly the same as the applicant had. So I'm just wondering, does it make, you were using $7.55. So does that make much of a difference there? That's like $1 million. So is that, Stephen?
All right. The reduction, like the $7 reduction brings it down to $10,439,000. Yeah.
All right. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Stevens, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
And I don't either, so thank you very much. So that takes us to 1925 Sargent Avenue.
This one I do not have a recommendation. So.
Okay. So proceed, please.
Yeah. So the roll number is 070421790000, 1925 Sargent Avenue. The assessed value is $20,318,000. There's been 10 buildings constructed on this property or added onto this property over the years. They range from 1955 to 2010. The majority of this building, though, has been built after 2002. The zoning is M2. The land area is 475,786 square feet. We have a gross floor area of 99,496 square feet and a leasable area of 99,056 square feet for a land to plan of 2.6. So on my page 2, you can see where it's located. It's the red dot that says 1925 Sargent beside it. It's obviously in the airport or the airport roll number area. It's just off Wellington Avenue, close to Sargent or on Sargent, of course, and not too far from Route 90. So page 3, you can take a look at the property from above. You can see it's a fairly expansive property. It's got a large section to the east of it that is some vacant land that can be used eventually for development if needed. There is some parking in the rear, of course, and parking in the front. Page 4 gives you another view of the subject property. And again, page 5 can give you a few other angles from the rear and the side of the subject property. We're going to move to my page 7, which is the model income approach. We're using, like I stated before, a leasable area of 199,056 square feet. We're using a rent of $7.45 a square foot, which is giving us a potential rent of $1,482,967. We're applying a 3.5% vacancy, expenses of 3%, and overall capitalization rate of 6.7%. And when we capitalize the value, the net operating income, we get an estimated value rounded of $20,318,000. So I should note that the effective year or overall year built of this property is 2003. It's had additions in 2009. So originally 8,000 square feet of the building we have built in 1955. Over 40,000, or actually over 50,000 built in 2002, and 81,000 built in 2009. So our model on page 7 is based off of market rental rates on page 6. So we're looking for similar size buildings as a subject property. So we're looking at properties. You have to go kind of across the city to find ones this size. So we're on Fife, Redwood, Bayesian, and Sony Place. So again, these are all spread out across the city. From one's in the St. Boniface Industrial Park, one's in the Fort Garry area, one's in the Inkster area, and Redwood's fairly close. Well, I mean, it's near the Inkster Park area as well. So the lease starts range from 2008 to 2017. The lease terms range from as low as 3 years up to 15 years, and the leasable areas range from 108,000 square feet all the way up to 228,000 square feet. Wall heights range from as low as 22 feet all the way up to 34 feet, and the effective years built range from 1979 up to 2001, and then you can see the rental rates ranging from $5.50 on a low up to $7.91 as a high. On my page 9, you can see our capitalization rate chart. You can see the 20th to the 80th percentile is from 5.5 to 7.45. You can see that the subject property falls within there at 6.70. Similarly, you can see beside the chart some of the outside sources such as Kohler's, CBRE, and Cushman and Wakefield, and they have ranges from 6% to 6.75, 5.75 to 6.5, and 6 to 6.5 for the industrial properties. So our capitalization rate is 6.7 is within their range as well. So we feel the assessment of $20,318,000 is fair and equitable and should be confirmed. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Navarro?
Yes. So the first question talks about the single occupant risk. So this is a single occupant property. In your opinion, would a single occupant property have more risk than a multi-tenanted building?
Yeah, I think we've talked about this before. I mean, it's an interesting way to look at it. Yes, if the tenant leaves, there's obviously 100% vacancy. In multi-tenant buildings, though, you have the disadvantage of having multiple tenants, which you could be carrying more vacancy more frequently. So you could be at 12% vacancy, 15% vacancy, 20% vacancy, instead of ever having 100%, having the building 100% occupied. So, I mean, there is a risk of one tenant leaving, yes, and having 100% vacancy, but multi-tenant buildings carry their own risk as well.
Okay, thank you. In terms of the overall size of the building, which is approaching 200,000 square feet, there is only one property in your list of rent comparables that is close to that size, and that one is at $6.33. So the model would adjust, or does it adjust for size?
It does, but I mean, when you get up into the 100,000 ranges, you're not getting a lot of you obviously don't have the quantity of rents that you would have around 10,000, 20,000, 30,000. So the model is only using what it has. So it will consider, for example, 200 Beijing at 136,000 square feet as a comparable for this type of property.
Mm-hmm. Now, in terms of the area, you noted that, you know, once you get over 100,000 square feet, you start looking at other areas. And I don't necessarily disagree with that, but there has to be some type of, I guess, rationale coming out of the comparables. And in terms of the area that they come out of, would properties that are more so in the northwest quadrant of the city, and I would say that the airport area is still in the northwest quadrant, would those comparables be a better reflection of the market value than, say, something that is in the southeast quadrant, like Beacon? Because you really could be looking at a specific market in that St. Boniface Industrial Park area, could you not?
Yeah. So when we're looking at comparables, we definitely take location into consideration. I mean, yes, I would say Redwood and Fife are closer to the subject property than Beacon and possibly Sony. But you also want to look at leasable area, wall heights, effective year builds. So that's why those are also up there too. So you kind of have to take them all into consideration.
Okay. So as I mentioned before, there is really only one property here that is close to the subject, which is, again, close to 200,000 square feet, and that is Sony Place. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, we know that this is on airport land, so there is obviously a land lease in place, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And in terms of the overall outlook for buildings, regardless of the era that they were built in, whether they were built in the 1970s, 80s, or 90s, as time goes by, these buildings are actually upgraded in terms of capital. So the mechanicals are repaired or upgraded, electrical is upgraded, HVAC systems are only have about a 20 to 25 year lifespan. So those would be continuously upgraded. So most of these properties, whether they're built in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, would at some point undergo these types of repair and renovations, correct?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Received any questions?
No, I think I'm good. Thank you.
Steve, do you have any questions?
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
And I don't either. So, Mr. Bell, you can go ahead.
Okay. So we have 1925 Sargent Avenue, and this is the standard arrows, I believe, or they call it Plan 6. This is the engine test facility. So what happens here is that they have a building at the front, much smaller. You can see it in the overhead picture on, I don't know if you can actually capture it. It's at the very bottom of page 6. You can kind of see the bulk of the building, which houses most of the operation. And then to the bottom of it, you'll see a building with a kind of a flue sticking out of it. That is the actual place where they test the engines. And the rest of it is effectively a warehouse where they fix engine components, engines, and service them. If you look at page 26 or 36, 26. Can't even see if that's a 26 or 30. 26 site pictures. So you can see what we're dealing with, which is essentially, I mean, it's kind of like a flex style warehouse type of property. Has office areas in the mezzanine, and also on page, I believe it is 32, you can see the engine test facility, which is the one that I was speaking about. So in terms of what we're looking at here, I don't think we're looking at a building that was designed specifically for one intended use. I think this has some flexibility in it. So in terms of the comparables, I think it's correct that you can move outside of this particular area to look at properties. But I mean, by area, I mean outside of the airport. So it's not strictly a manufacturing type of building that was designed specifically for one purpose. So the highest and best use is considered its current use. In terms of the analysis, we're looking at the reference date of April 1, 2021, but the physical condition as of 2023. And the approach that we've used is obviously the income approach. So for rentable area, we have 199,056 square feet. The city has used a rent of $7.45. We've used a combined rent of $5.91. That is $6 per square foot for the, we'll call it the manufacturing area, and then $16,805 for the mezzanine areas. So that is basically a blended rent. Now, in terms of the comparables that we've used, and we'll note that the property has M2 zoning. It is a land lease, and none of the other comparables have land leases or land lease payments. So they are outside of the airport area. However, the first property, which is in the northwest area, just like the subject, we're looking at $5.95 per square foot. The second, again, is in the northwest area at $5.70 per square foot. The third, again, is in the northwest area at $6.36 per square foot. And the next one over, which is Clarence, which is in the southwest side of Winnipeg, that one is at $6.75. The next one is Burmac, which is the southwest, or is it southeast? Burmac may be southeast, actually. That one is $5.85 per square foot. And then lastly, Inkster, which is the northwest, at $5.17 per square foot. So most of these properties are below the subject in terms of their overall size, I'll note. The next page over, we have some rent comparables that we've collected from some of the other assessor appeals that we've looked at for larger building areas. So the first property is 861 McLeod. That is in the northeast section of the city, around 100,000 square feet at $4.98. The next one is 1750 Inkster, northwest area, $3.81. The next one is 1155, again in the northwest area, which is $5.07 per square foot. Burmac, I think we've already included that one. Southeast, that is $6.15. Northwest for 10 Hutchings, that is $5.72. 1000 King Edward is northwest at $6.05 for 205,297. What I will note about 1000 King Edward is that it underwent a major redevelopment more recently. So, I mean, we take that as being fairly close to the subject. It is a larger building, and again, it is at $6.05 per square foot. The next one over is 1345 Redwood. That is $6.95. That is also in the northwest quadrant. That is 112,340 square feet. And lastly, Sony Place, which is in the southwest quadrant at $6.33. Now, in terms of vacancy, We are suggesting a vacancy rate of 4%. That is our base rate for the entire city. We do make adjustments for vacancy, but in this case, we made no further adjustment to the vacancy. We have applied the same shortfall rate of $3.85. We didn't find much of a vacancy issue, obviously. So there is, in our opinion, no need to adjust the shortfall rate. In terms of non-recovered expenses, we apply 5%. That is a market variable. I have presented that on several occasions, and I believe everyone here has heard it. So I can present, or you can, if you know it, we can just take it at face value.
And I think we've all heard it before. So
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to, unless you have new arguments that you haven't presented before, I think you'll probably can expect.
Well, I think the main one to capture from that is that it is only looking at a few non-recoverable expenses. And I think the confusion was always that, you know, we were including management expenses where management expenses are always recovered. And that's not correct. We're looking at a completely different set of non-recoverable expenses. Now, the other issue is obviously the fact that in every single Altus cap rate study, we actually factor in that 5% into our cap rate calculations. So if we take that 5% out, then we need to adjust that calculation. And we would say typically by a cap rate premium. So we typically say about a 25-point upward adjustment on the cap rate to account for taking out that component of our cap rate calculations. Speaking of cap rates, we include a cap rate section that is taken out of our cap rate report. More importantly, it talks about the investment categories, Class A, Class B, and the non-investment grade properties, and the associated cap rate ranges that we have for these types of properties. So in terms of what we've done with our categories and our cap rate ranges, they are consistent with what we've done in the previous cycle. So we have looked at the change in the market rates, so movement, not so much the cap rate calculations that we take from other brokerages. And we look at how much they are shifting from one cycle to another. So that is basically one of the factors that we use in applying our cap rates. Now, in terms of the cap rate, to begin with, I don't think there's an issue because the assessor has used a cap rate of 6.7. We've used a cap rate of 6.5, which is actually lower. So we included in our cap rate a recognition that this is a nice building. It's a newer building. And that is why we adjusted it further than 6.7. And that, again, is consistent with our table. So if you look at page 24, again, we have a blended rate of $5.91, a vacancy of 4%, giving us an effective market income of $1,128,931. We've applied that same 385 shortfall, management expenses of 5%, 2% other, which is actually should be known as structural. So we have an expense allowance of $109,680, a net operating income of $1,019,251, capitalized at $6.50. That is $15,680,787 or $15,681 rounded. And in the appendix section, we have pictures that we've already gone over. And I've also included the income and expenses for the property for the year in question that we looked at, which was 2020. So I am open for questions.
Thank you. Mr. Livingston, any questions?
Just a few. In terms of this property, has it physically changed at all since the last assessment cycle?
I don't believe so.
Oh.
I
And
went
like,
over,
sorry, go
over
ahead.
the permits and there didn't seem to be very much happening there. So
And in terms of the market, you would say cap rates have pretty much stayed the same, or if not compressed, this last cycle?
I would say for certain types of properties, say the high-end logistics and warehousing. So some of the stuff that we're seeing constructed outside of the city of Winnipeg, which you see in Rosser municipality, so Centerport, and in southwest Winnipeg along the McGilvery Boulevard and the RM at McDonald. Some of the stuff that's being built in there is very high end, and especially so in Rosser, because that is supposed to be Centerport. It's supposed to be kind of a new gateway to the west. Those areas are definitely seeing some upward tick in those types of very specific properties that are, very new logistics warehousing properties. So I would admit to a shift in the cap rates of those properties. Other properties along the scale that we have in our cap rate ranges, there have been some movement from about 25 points to say 50 points. And we looked at that in our cap rate report. If you've gone over it, we've acknowledged that there has been some shift in it. And we haven't deviated from that at all. So for this property, it fell into the top end, or you could say the low end of the Class A buildings. But again, we acknowledge that it is a better property and should have a cap rate of around 6.5.
Right. So this is a better property. Hasn't really had much physical depreciation, I guess you could say. So I guess with last cycle, there was a settlement for $19,299,000, which is only, and now we're only 3% higher at $20,318,000 than last cycle, and you're coming in at just over 15 million. I'm kind of questioning if the market hasn't changed much and there's been no major, depreciation to this building or issues or fires. I don't understand where the $4 million cut that you're suggesting comes from.
Well, the $4 million cut looks at specifically the rent, and that is the big issue. So I can't really speak to any deal or agreement that was signed previously. I certainly wasn't privy to that agreement, and I don't know what went into it. I know that, certain types of agreements are without prejudice. We do them, I guess we could say on a handshake basis. I don't know what was really involved in those agreements.
And that's fair. And I'm not bringing in the basis or what it was agreed on or anything. I'm just stating that.
I will state though that I think having looked at the information and having seen a lack of rents that are this size and comparable to this property, I'm not sure that I would have signed an agreement. Certainly not for the amount that I saw there. I would have looked at it a lot closer, and I think that is what I've done now. And I think the rents that we've looked at, that I've looked at, kind of speak to the issue here. Many of the rents are in the northwest area. Some of them are actually quite close to this property. So I tend to think that there is some correlation there. Maybe it's not $6, but it can't be at $7.50. I just do not agree with that. There has to be some type of adjustment made to this property. And what I say about the one property which was 200 Bagan, which had a fairly high rent, I'm of the opinion that is a property that is very specific, or that is a rent that is very specific to that area. So I'll leave it there. Those are my points.
And those are all my questions.
Do you have any questions? I have none, Mr. Chairman. See, do you have any questions?
I think my question was just answered with the question and the answer we just heard, so I'm good, thank you.
Thank you. So I guess my only question is, all the comparables that both you and Mr. Lopez has put forward, none of them have airport access.
None of them have airport access.
Yeah, to the tarmac and to flying planes and to.
Neither does this one, though.
Well, does it they repair airplanes there?
No, it's not directly
So it's just the
connected.
proximity.
Yeah.
They can't take airplanes directly from the airport into this facility?
They can't take airplanes, period, into this facility.
Okay.
It doesn't have the wall height.
So they just have to move the engines and bring them in for the back?
Yeah, the engines are removed elsewhere
So you
and then
can take it
brought.
anywhere in the city then, we see you saying.
Yeah, it is effectively a type of flex warehouse. It's not designed, and I brought that point up at the very beginning, that it was not a purpose-built building.
Well, I'm glad, I guess I missed that, sorry.
Yeah.
Because that's good, because that was under,
And that's why I pointed out the issue of, for example, 1000 King Edward, which is fairly close to this property, which underwent a major redevelopment. That property is fairly close by. I don't know why those rents would not be reflective of a rent that would be, I guess, a rent that would be achieved in this location. It is owner occupied, obviously, there's no rent there, but again, Vegan is a completely different market.
okay, well, thank you for your answer.
Yeah.
Okay. That's my question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Here's a quick five.
Yes, okay, we'll take 5-minute recess before our next matter.
Actually, sorry, can we recess for 15 minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, so we're gonna have a 15-minute adjournment.
Okay, thank you.
you're live.
Thank you. Okay, well, next proceed with agenda item number 72088 Wellington Avenue. And Mr. Lopez, when you're ready, you can proceed.
Sure. The roll number is 07569138805208 Wellington Avenue. We have an assessed value of $12,124,000. Classification is 40.
Thank you. Okay, well, next proceed with agenda.
Sorry, what happened?
We get some feedback somewhere. I'm not sure where it came from.
Oh, okay.
Okay, go ahead. I think we're good now.
Okay, so the assessed value is $12,124,000. We have a classification of 40 institutional with a liability of S, taxable school exempt. This is an airport parcel. It's on the airport area. We have an effective year and actual year built of 2000 and of 2022, and we have a wall height of 44 feet. The land area is 168,982 square feet. We have a gross floor area and a leasable area of 85,660 square feet for a land to plan of 2.62. So if you turn to my page 2, you can see the location of the property. It's the red dot. It's near the roundabout for the airport on Wellington there. This is the new aviation museum. The only recent pictures I have are on page 3 and 2, where it wasn't quite finished, or 3 and 4, where it wasn't quite finished construction. But if you scroll down to my page 10, I do have an article from CBC which shows some more recent pictures. And of course, the article is interesting as well if you want to read through it. So on page 10 and 11, 12, 13, and then on 15, you can see a site plan of the area they have. Should also know on page 11, I highlighted that they stated that it was $27 million to build this as an overall $48 million price tag. So the building itself was $27 million for its cost. So the building itself is interesting. It's got a total floor area of 85,666 square feet. The main area of 64,487 square feet. Then also has an upper area which has 21,173 square feet. So on the main area, there is obviously a display area for the museum where they show their planes. There's a gift shop, coat check, washrooms. They have a program area, of course, mechanical and electrical rooms. They have an archive area. They have a flight simulator, and they have a few other, obviously, utility rooms. They have an elevator going up to the second floor along with stairs. On the second level, there's administrative offices, there's a lunchroom, washroom, lockers, showers, both men's and women's rooms. They have two separate classrooms. They have a science of flight exhibit up there. And they also have some meeting rooms and some serving rooms and an observation lounge. So that's sort of the main blueprint of the museum itself. So we start to look at the valuation that the city has put on this property. We'll move to my page 6. So we are assessing the 85,660 square feet. We're applying a rent of $9.43 a square foot. We have a vacancy of 2.5%, expenses of 2%, and a overall capitalization rate of 6.3%. When we capitalize the net operating income, we get a value of $12,124,000. That's rounded. So on my page 5, I have 3 leases at Kernahan, Discovery, and Debates. They're at $8.15, $8.20, $8.70. The effective years range from 1975 up to 2014. The wall heights are obviously smaller than the subject property. They range from 24 feet all the way up to 28 feet. The leased areas range from 51,000 all the way up to 108,000. And the lease starts range from 2010 up to 2015. You can see on my page 8, we have our capitalization rate chart. We have our 20th to 80th percentiles between 5.5 and 9.80. This is at 6.3, so it falls within the 20th and 80th percentile. And you can also see that it kind of follows through with the this is the 2022. So we have a high and a low of 5.5 to 9.8, and our 20th to 80th percentile falls between 6.34 and 7.80. So this capitalization rate falls between the 20th and the 80th percentile. And it is supported on the chart there by some outside sources as well. So taking all this into consideration, we feel the value of $12,124,000 is fair and equitable. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Newfeld, do you have any questions? Or Mr. Mercury?
So I think I'm just going to defer to Mr. Newfeld to start, and then I may have some additional questions at the end.
That's fine. Go ahead, Mr. Newfeld.
Thank you. Now you said as you began the 44-foot wall height. Where's that been measured at?
That probably would have came from the plans.
I'm looking at the plans now. Can you tell me where on the plans it says that?
I don't have the plans in front of me with the wall height on them.
Is the wall height consistent throughout the entire building?
Well, the wall height would be different due to having 2 stories. So in some parts, the wall height would not be 44 feet. No.
Well, sorry, this is exterior wall height you're reporting, is it not?
Yes, exterior wall height. Yes.
Is the exterior wall height consistent throughout the property, to your knowledge?
From looking at the pictures, it looks like there would be some sloping to the building, so it probably would not be consistent throughout.
Okay. And is the exterior wall, you're valuing this under an industrial parameter, correct?
Yes, we're valuing it under an industrial flex warehouse parameter.
Now, in the use of industrial measurements, does anybody care what the exterior wall height is?
Well, that is how it is typically measured. So, I mean, whether somebody cares or not is an opinion of matter, I guess.
I'm going to put to you that it is not. It's interior clear space that's measured. You know what the interior clear height is.
I do not.
And if you have a building with, and I'm looking at your pictures, the interior, let's say page 10 and 13. Do you know how thick those trusses are?
I do not know how thick those trusses are, no.
What would you expect to see in an industrial building for a truss height?
For a truss site?
Yeah,
I'm not too sure.
okay. On your page, sorry, I'm just jumping around here. Looking at your work up on page 6, was this prepared by your model?
Correct. It was prepared by a model.
When you inputted this into the model, then I take it that what would be your typical inputs? First, you put a flux warehouse. Is that correct?
Correct.
And what are the other inputs that are put into it?
Give me a second here. So,
Like area, obviously, right?
Obviously, area, year built. These are the things that we're looking at.
Yeah. Ceiling height.
Ceiling height's put in, correct?
Okay. Land ratio.
Yeah, we do calculate the land ratio. Yes.
Land ratio. Okay. Am I missing anything?
In terms of the income approach,
No, and in sort of in terms of the input that you're putting in for your model making.
yeah, those are some of the main things that we put in for sure.
Okay. Now, in regard to land ratio at 2.62, would you consider this to be normal?
2.62 is fairly normal for an industrial property.
And this includes land at both the south and the north sides, though, correct?
Correct.
So how do you get to the land on the north side?
Well, like I said, I have limited pictures due to when our pictures were taken and when this was completed. On the north side of the property, it looks like you would have to either access through Wellington or there is access at the rear.
I'm sorry, I'm speaking of vehicle access to the north side. To your knowledge, is there vehicle access permitted to the north side?
To my knowledge, I don't know. I have not inspected this property.
Okay. And then the south side, I'm looking at your picture on page 3. The south side is tapered off and a parking lot at this time. So there is obviously vehicle access to that. I see vehicles parked there. Is that deemed adequate for an industrial building?
The parking on the south side. This is on my page 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, the south side it's quite narrow. It's almost right up. It looks like it's almost right up against the street.
Yeah. Okay. And as an industrial building, would you expect to have adequate loading doors?
Yeah.
And how many does this have?
This doesn't seem to have any of the overhead loading doors that industrial buildings have.
in terms of the vacancy rate, and looking again back to page 6, you said it was model generated. So, where does this? How is this calculated? You have like neighborhoods.
Yeah, we break them up into neighborhoods.
So, what would this be for? The 2.5%.
Yeah, this would kind of be for the St. James area.
And when this rate was determined, was any outside source consulted, or sort of what was the source?
The sources are income expense mailers.
And was this compared to outside sources like the Johnson report or other realtors reports?
When we calculate them, and then we can look to see if we're similar, but no, we create our own percentages.
Okay, sorry about that. I was just looking for something I was asking. I thought it'd be a longer answer. The expenses, you're just allowing. Why is this one allowing only 2%? Oh, this is the parameter from the last.
Yeah, this is we're doing the 2022.
Okay, and when this parameter, has the department changed or modified its views since then, considering the number of decisions on the 2%, or are you still sticking with
no,
that?
it had nothing to do with any of the decisions. We did increase it to 3% this time after reviewing the market with our income expense mailers.
Shortfall is the cost of carrying it vacant, and I'm just wondering if the assessed value plays into this.
I'm sorry, can you elaborate?
Well, if this were assessed as this is assessed at the 12 million, and if this were a normal industrial building, the taxes would be approximately $300,000, or $3 a foot. Sorry,
The assessed value is calculated using the shortfall. So no, the shortfall is not affected by the assessed value.
Right. So, but if it were, the taxes would be approximately $350 a square foot, and yet the allowance for shortfall is only 3.75. Has there ever been a thought to trying to modify your shortfalls with the actual taxes?
Not to my knowledge, no.
In terms of capitalization rates, is your only evidence been presented on page 8?
Correct.
And have there been any 85,000 square foot museums sold in the last few years?
Not to my knowledge in Winnipeg, no.
Any museums?
Not to my knowledge.
And so this is just pulled from the parameters, assuming it's one of these industrial buildings that are on the, and you've lumped all the industrial buildings, A's and B's together, correct?
Correct, yeah. So we're valuing this as we're using similar parameters to a flex warehouse.
Did you have an opportunity? Now you mentioned you had looked at the plans. Did you have the opportunity to look at other parts of the building's construction, such as the foundation?
No, we asked for an inspection a number of times. Obviously, we weren't able to get in during COVID, and time just sort of ran out. In terms of the other plans, we requested a bunch of the costing information, and we actually never received it. So.
But you mentioned you had plans when you said
we have like drawing, we have sketches, like
you have sketches. Okay,
yeah,
now
we have site plans, so we don't actually have any of the material costs.
You don't have the structural?
No.
Okay. What would be the typical floor loading in an industrial building? Do you know?
I'm not too sure.
Well, it's got to be strong enough to hold the weight that's stored on it, correct?
Yes, correct.
And the higher you go, the higher the floor loading, because you're going to have more racks on. Is that a fair comment?
I would say that's fair, yes.
Those are the questions I intended on asking about the industrial part of it, and I think Mr. Mercury has might have some more on the whole concept.
Yes.
Yeah, and if I forget when I get another chance in the next hearing, so go ahead.
Thanks. Just as a follow-up, you've used the model as an industrial property here. You would agree that any prospective purchaser of this property looking to utilize this space as an industrial warehouse facility would have to expend considerable sums to modify the facility?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there, like I stated, there's not even like typical overhead doors that you get in industrial properties,
right?
For loading and unloading.
Right. Leaving aside, obviously, the issue of access, just this was designed as a museum. It wasn't designed as an industrial warehouse, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And when you apply your cap rate, your model-based cap rate, did you consider making any adjustments, manual adjustments to that cap rate, given the risk of this property if it were to be actually marketed for sale?
I mean, after we implemented our income, we looked at our value and we looked at what the cost was to build this, and I think we felt that the value was fair. So no, we didn't make any adjustments.
But that was the cost to build it was for not for market purposes. It was more in the nature of a public asset, in the sense that this is a museum that receives funding from all levels of government. You're aware?
I'm aware that they receive funding, and they also generate an income as well.
Right, but you're not suggesting that the income generated from this facility is self-sufficient? In other words, the ticket revenue, if you will, or any merchandise revenue within the facility is enough to allow the continued operation of this facility, are you?
I'm not suggesting that they are self-sufficient. I would guess that might be a goal of theirs eventually, but they've just started. So
you're aware that there has been significant capital fundraising efforts, and they have in fact received grants from the provincial and federal government to operate this facility and build it?
Yep. That's from, I believe I heard that, yes.
That's not something that a typical investor would expect to receive when valuing, when looking at acquiring assets such as this.
I'm not in disagreement. This is not a typical industrial build.
Okay. Those are my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Stevens, any questions?
I think Mr. Mercury's questions were sort of along the lines of mine. I just, Mr. Lobenstein, just this is a unique building. Its use anyway. Did you consider any other options for looking at how to assess it?
Yeah, we considered the cost approach as well. And we came up with the income value. So I mean, we looked at both, and they actually in our model they came out fairly similar, is my understanding.
Okay.
This was put on the roll by my predecessor, so but I'm not in at all disagreement with how he valued it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all I had. Thanks.
Any questions?
Mr. Lobenstein, I see the article that talks about $27 million for the building. So, and I'm looking at the building, and what do you think? Because there's grants involved. The total value to the building and land. What is your feeling?
I'm not going to say like a feeling. I brought in the value of $12 million, $124,000 as a value, and I think that's a fair valuation for this property. I mean, when you see the value of $27,000, this is also obviously for a museum. I feel that you're not. there's nothing in it quite like the market. In the market, there's nothing quite like it. There's no depreciation yet towards this building, where a lot of these other buildings that we're using to value it have depreciation. So I think valuing on the income is a fair way to do it, instead of on the cost.
And did you look at the permits at all taken out?
Well, we didn't necessarily have the permits, but we have. We were in contact with the owners, and they did confirm that the building did cost $27 million to build.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So, Mr. Livingston, and this is a small issue, but I noticed that on these properties that we dealt with earlier in this vicinity, they are giving a 3.5% vacancy factor. This one only has 2.5%. Is it because of the year, or is it because this property is different than the standard Arrow property? Is it a different area, or like why would it command a 1% less vacancy factor?
That's a good question. I'm not 100% sure on why we have a different vacancy. Oh, yeah, it's because of the year. My mistake, because we're looking at 2020 right now. Yeah, just a different year.
Okay, I think all the questions I would have had it will be asked. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I get confused. We have both.
Yeah, for sure.
Both years we're dealing with.
Right. Okay, so that concludes questioning. So, Mr. You thought you can go ahead with your brief?
Yes, thank you. No, I did email in my rebuttal earlier today, and I copied Mr. Lobenstein, so he does have it. And I'm just wondering how you'd like me to deal with that procedurally.
Well, it's your matter. I'll let you go in the way you want to. Probably you can do with it any way you want to. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a particular order. Do you have that information?
Yes, it's been distributed.
Okay. So I guess I'll start with that then. And this is the rebuttal for both cases being heard today. Firstly, in an order, the assessor has provided 3 rents on his page 5. So in the rebuttal, the first one has to deal with 630 Kernahan. This is page 1 is our listing on this property. We were listing it at asking $450. So what the assessor has provided is the gross rent. Now the sketch of our listing. Sorry, this isn't the sketch of our listing. Next, the listing was for the 108,000 square feet was available at that time. The sketch below is from a lease for another unit in this property, and that's the area marked around in blue. The 108,000 the assessor is referring to is to the right of that, and you can see it's just on one of the other units in the property. But I'm showing you this because this is another lease drawn up the same time on our second page. And the rent is, in that case, $725 gross. And so this is a gross rent building and not a net rent building. The actual net on the subject space, and I got this from our broker, Jim Kulik, who did the deal, and he was trying to dig up his deal, but it was $286 a foot was what the actual paid rent was, not $815. The net was $2.86. The second rent, I'm waiting for an answer from. The third rent is 310 Debates, and this has come up in a previous hearing, and on the page, the next page marked the heading of 310 Debates is that this is just an email exchange I found because this has come up as a comp before. That the actual paid rent is $660 because there was $468,000 in tenant allowances paid on this deal. So, we're not debating what they spent on it or if it contributed anything to it. We know that the tenant is paying got cash, and the net effective is $660. So if you're going to use a comparable rent, it's got to be clean, not loaded with inducements and allowances. In the market, the inducement controls the rental rate, and these rents were not clear of that. The next few rents have to deal with the next assessment appeal, but I'm going to the page marked page 7, which marked market floor loading for warehouse. Now this is a modern plan of a warehouse that's being offered on the market, and this is the standard. On the little column under highlights, floor loading of 1,000 pounds a square foot with standard leg load of 12,500.
Sorry, I just want to. Sorry, just give me a second. Is this new evidence, Rocky? I don't see how this is rebutting anything that I put in my brief.
I asked you about floor loading, and you said you didn't know. So now we're rebutting your verbal testimony that this is the market standard.
Okay.
Well,
And I'm not going to dwell on this for all day here, but the point is the 12,500 pounds of leg load in this case was for a bill.
this actually is new evidence, but you know what? I don't think it really is going to have a lot of influence on the final outcome anyway. So.
Okay, but this was for a building that offered 32 feet clear, and the leg load is for the racking. The more height you have, the more weight you need. So,
and we're aware already that this building is
okay,
next warehouse, and it's going to take
1,000 pounds.
Yeah, it's going to take a lot of renovations to make it such, and so we've
okay. Yeah, thank you, and I'm not going to spend all day on it. We did have the plans reviewed by Gateway Construction, and on the page marked page 9, there's a cross section from the sketch, and what this shows is that they're using a 178 slab. That's the millimeters. That 7-inch slab with only 5 inches of fill. That's all they required. So the calculation on the floor loading on the subject is written here on the prior page at 200 to 300 pounds per square foot, as opposed to a requirement of 1,000. So yes, it's not a warehouse. That's the rebuttal, because it can't take warehouse loads. In my primary evidence, I can tell you what the loads are, and maybe I'll repeat myself, but an aircraft is a very light thing. The greatest weight on any aircraft is the payload. Second is the fuel load. Third are the engines. None of those aircraft have that. They're just light aluminum frames. So it isn't designed as a warehouse. And my reason this is in rebuttal is because the assessor is using warehouse rents, which cost more, which are different. And plus the renovations there is a page. The 10th page shows the hangar door. In any hangar, the door is actually load bearing, and it's meant to be closed. And when it's open, the building can maintain, I guess, what's called passive loads, but not the active load. Say if there's wind or snow or sealant or roof accumulations, then the door has to stay closed because it forms part of it. That's not what you would do in a warehouse, because you're going to have your doors open all the time, and you would have to rebuild this section, put in posts, redo the foundation, and go down. And the area around it, our quotation was 450 square feet of area around where the door operates. That's probably about 10,000 feet to rebuild that hangar door to use as a warehouse. Plus, it needs loading docks. And a loading dock has got to be at dock level, which means you've got to excavate a ramp down, put in the drainage, and it has to be long enough to accommodate the 53-foot trailer at a level amount. So depending on how many docks you put in, it's going to cost $60,000 to $100,000 a dock. And I felt that was appropriate to use as rebuttal. And I think that was, the rest of it is for the next year. And I can if there's you want to ask questions or you want me to launch into the evidence.
No, I think in all fairness, we should allow questions to be asked now and then move on with your main evidence.
Okay.
So, do you have any questions?
Yeah, just a few. So on your first page, you have a lease for 630 Kernahan, but that's not the lease that I supplied. This is a completely different one, right?
Oh, the listing was for the one you supplied at 450 ask. The one I'm supplying at 725 gross is for New Flyers space. I think you got the tire company in there, and it was done at the same time. That's
okay. And on your page 3 for debates, you just have an email saying that there were TIs. There's nothing else suggesting it. No lease.
well, this was direct from the broker who did the deal, and this was our office deal, and I have it from him, and it was rather short notice. This is the first one I dug up. It's a company deal. I can speak for the company.
Okay, those are all my questions.
Thank you. So, any questions?
Done, Mr. Chairman.
Steve, do you have any questions?
No questions, thanks.
I don't either. So, what would be brief, Mr. McCullough?
Thank you. Firstly, I did put the two briefs together because all the physical information is the same, and then I've separated the two workups on the same page, and the one that we're looking at for this hearing is on page 1. And on page 1, we've applied a rent of $9 on the floor area and $6 on the mezzanine level, and a 6% vacancy rate. This vacancy is based on the city averages and the St. James averages, and we use the Johnson report. For the reference here, actually St. James rate was 8%, and the city rate was 5.7. We applied it at 6, just as it's in an area unto itself. So we thought the city rate was preferable, and that's our source. Now Johnson provides all his data in the report, and I'm not introducing it as evidence, but directly, but just to give you an idea, the backup is it's a listing. Every property is listed, and it's all transparent. That's why we like to use it, and it's undergone third-party verification by Wayne Johnson. The non-recoverables, we're still on this battle on the assessor says they don't count. We say they count. You're going to hear it again and again. The assessor does not set the standard for market on this matter. They can have their opinion, but they don't set the market standard. And the market standard is how you determine a non-recoverable. I do not set the standard. I'm just reporting what they are. The costs for maintaining property, and I have on page 95 and 96, and some of these are post-reference, and some of them are not, but they are an average of managed properties as to what the costs are to carry property. And these costs are the deductions from the net income that the investor receives. So this is what drives the income approach. It's the money the investor receives. It's nothing else. It's nothing hypothetical. And you can see that the averages were 9.81% with a median of 7.01%. Sometimes costs are high, sometimes they're low. We put those rates in to stabilize periods of time when they are higher. But these are real numbers, real deductions from income. The shortfall we calculated at 683, and this was done on a calculation of the taxes at this rate. And I actually used the estimated actual tax load from the property, and you can see that we've estimated that at $3.38 a square foot. And utilities, the space to run the space, the utilities are a normal charge for vacant occupancy, and then repairs and maintenance at $1. So approximately $6.83 a square foot. It's a more expensive building to operate. regardless of what its use is. You can't arbitrarily put a value on shortfall that's half what the actual costs would be. In terms of capitalization rate, we had in mind to try. I mean, we were looking for more unique buildings and just ended up settling on the industrial because that's the closest it was, and because most of our other matters were addressed in our selection of the proper rental rate, the capitalization rate could be a bit more normalized. But the issues that we were dealing with, and I'm going to take you through all of these, were listed on page 2. Firstly, it's on leased land. And not only is it leased, but it's restricted usage. It is only aviation uses. It is only uses approved by the Winnipeg Airport Authority. It is not free for anyone to do. So if you would like to operate a business on there, you have to meet what they want, and they want an aircraft related use and not any particular use. You can't just open up whatever you want. It has to be what they want. That's a significant restriction on a property. The access is the next major issue, and on page this is my little hand drawing, so it looks a little messy, but starting on page 4 is how do you get to this site? Whether you're a truck or a car, you follow the red route. It's the only way in. You go in around through the where the arrivals are, and you have to go all around to get to the site on the one-way street. The green is the departure. And if you look at the pathway on that, which I went from Google Earth, starting on page 5, just taking you through the pathway. So first, we've all been to the airport. You separate, departures and arrivals. You got to go to the top one, the one on the right, not the one on the left, because that goes to the rental parking lot. You cannot access the site from rental cars or from the hotels. It doesn't fit. It doesn't work. And then once you get there, to the next page 5 shows, then you split. You go up onto the arrival side rather than the departure side. And you'll notice that there's a picture there for buses. They also go to departure side. On page 6, the top picture shows the height warning lights. So these will go on if you exceed the height of the walkway that you'll be going underneath. The bottom shows that entranceway to the walkway where you have the choice of either going to the right for taxis or to the left for pickups. Page 7 is the walkway. So your truck has to be able to go under that. That's not that isn't work for all trucks. It's probably about 13, 14 feet. So I think the last time I looked at the stack on a Peterbilt, they ran about 15, 16 feet. So it's not going to clear there for a truck. And then page 7 is the rest of the route. And at this point, page 8, the site hadn't been built. So that's the future location of the site. So that's restrictions on access. Now, the suggestion has often been made, well, why don't you just go through the airport? And I'm looking at the picture on page 3, and the airport access on the north of the building where the yellow former water bomber is parked is airside access. You do not get airside access, period. Like it's actually, I never introduced my qualifications earlier. I have accreditation as a pilot and as an air traffic controller, and which I once was, and it doesn't go away. It's permanent that I have an air traffic controller's license, but I haven't practiced for some time. But to travel on any aerodrome requires an AVOP, Airport Vehicle Operating Permit, and your vehicle must be equipped with a two-way radio. You must be trained in procedures, and then you're guided through the site. After 9/11, it became even harder to get onto aerodrome grounds because the security was tightened. If you've got a trailer full of goods they want to deliver to somebody and you want to go drop them off, you're not getting on grounds without an appointment and an escort. It's not very conducive to business, but that is the nature of security. And that's the big problem with this site, being considered in the industrial thing, is there is no large vehicle access. If there were an alternate use, it would be set up for receiving product on airside and shipping out on airside, and then getting smaller parcels on ground side to the north. The ground side picture as it is currently is shown on page 10. That's ground side access. That's an 8-foot loading door. Yes, significant renovations would be required. And you'll also notice here, by way, the pitch of the building, that there's different elevations. There's no dispute that the maximum height of the building is 44 feet on the outside. The inside is 29.5 feet clear because the trusses are that thick. They have to be because of the clear span. That's why it's so high. That doesn't make it a better building at 44 feet. That's irrelevant. It's 29.5. Most buildings would be, if you had a 29.5 foot clear, you'd be about 32 to 33 outside height because the trusses would be 3 to 4 feet. These happen to be much thicker, and I tried to capture the thickness of the pictures and measure it, and I eventually went to the plans, but it's 9 meters clear from plans, 29.5 feet, and that's what we're dealing with. The I'm continuing on with the cap rate on page 2. Building size is higher than our market. Design and layout, of course, there's our big problem, is built as a museum. It's not simple. It's going to cost a lot of money to convert to alternate use. And then you have to consider what is the highest and best use. And those are the factors. Now, the coverage ratio is small. And again, the coverage ratio is all about semi-trailer turning space for industrial buildings. Hypothetically, if you could get approach from the south, there's adequate room for 2 trailers to turn around, but it's not set up for that now. And telling you about the page 3, I was saying about access to it. You can see the road that comes from the east side. That's the hotel parking lot turnoff, and it comes in after the exits for the museum. And one could say, well, maybe you can just alter that. Well, no, you can't. This is one way, and it's also right outside the exits for the parking, paying for your parking, and it's federally controlled and under the authority of an airport authority. It's not a simple matter to say, I think we're going to convert this and we're going to let semi-trailers cross right in front of this traffic, and when we have it designed as an airport. So I have to say something at this point. If I alternate between the use of airport and aerodrome, the difference is the aerodrome is the physical description of the property. The airport is the business operated on it. And I'm telling you all this stuff because it's some of my pet peeves. It is not YWG. YWG is for the nav aid. CYWG is Winnipeg International Airport. It's my pet peeve here. Then there's some inside pictures, and starting page 9, there's the one showing the hangar door, and you can see it's a fairly strong door because it is designed to operate part of the load bearing capability in almost every aircraft hangar like this, where it's a large one. The events room, that's second floor level, so they have a meeting room for events, and also the second floor on page 10, there are classrooms up there. They have school groups in there who come and they have little classes after they look at the aircraft. Page 11 is an open area on the second floor with the red and yellow seat couches. A lot of wasted space, but that's the design. That's an architectural obsolescence factor. Bottom of page 11 is another limiting condition. This is the kitchen, and I don't know if any of you noticed something that's lacking here. The cooking equipment. They're not allowed to do it. That's under their lease. That's a dishwasher, and those are dish handling. They have to cater all their events. They do have warming and holding ovens, but they're not allowed to cook. Which is a bit of a limitation for alternate use, and you'll see later that it just means that for their current operation as a museum, they're losing a good moneymaker. They can't do. A great part of the space under the mezzanine is shown on page 12. File cabinets, paper, packaging material. And I'm now moving to page 13, work area, receiving area. That's bottom of page 13 is the receiving area where that one loading door is. Page 14 are the offices. And page 14, bottom of page 14, under the offices is the gift shop. Page 15, the top is food service operation. And this is what I was saying, they can't cook. So what they have under the tarp is a bottled drink cooler. That's their food service. Page 15 is a view from above and from the mezzanine showing the displays. And the point I was saying about loading is if you look at the yellow aircraft in the foreground, there's no load in there, there's no fuel in there, there's no motor in there. That fuselage and wings probably weighs 1,200 pounds. The rafters, the beams, the trusses are set up to hold 1,750 kilograms, which is typical load bearing of a warehouse. It is not designed for heavy duty. Aircraft are essentially very light. They're aluminum boxes on aluminum tubular frames. Page 16 is the sketch showing the layout of the property, and I had to paste this together from two sketches. The green box shows where the subject is on the planning map. Page 17 is their parking entrance, and yes, they do earn revenue from parking. Page 17, bottom is the entranceway. And there again, it's showing the roof dimensions and the irregular shape. Page 18 is the land lease, and page 19, the restriction on the food sales. Does not permit it. And page 20 shows that the landlord has full rights over any use on the facility. And it's very, very restrictive. We went through a couple of exercises on rents, and this is a bit out of order, but it flows better if I follow the document. We started looking at industrial rents, page 22, and you'll notice that close to the bottom, I have 630 Kernahan, 108,000 square feet at $2.86 a foot. I came from brokerage department here, and we did the deal. So what we do in cases like this on page 23, we run our own little model and just see with all these rents, where would the hypothetical rent be? And that's $4.19 a square foot based on the size and the calculation of comparing the size of a facility versus the expected rent as an industrial property. Then we moved into page 24, hangar rents. At this point, I do have to jump ahead a bit, and you don't have to hear this long, boring thing over again. I'm only going to do this once. On page 40, This is a memorandum from the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration, and on how to value airport aerodrome properties, appraisal standards. And these were devised because it's during privatization, there are more rents now, there are more sales of surplus land. And the key on this, as it relates to highest and best use, there's two things to be considered. Page 41, this is what you decide for an aerodrome property. These are the standards on it, and you can see that these are very much related to the operation on an airport. All of these issues, and size of the metropolitan area relates to the size of the goods and services and people flowing through the operation. And these all relate to the amenities on the site and the number of users. It does not relate to what happens around them. Now, that's the key here. Page 42, the University of South Florida actually had these documents, by the way. These are from the Appraisal Institute of the United States. So we subscribe, we see their library. These are the standards that they have to do valuation. So University of South Florida was actually the basis of establishing the FAA standards, and they're reiterated on page 43, the same statements. Now, the key here is in page 44, in the box. It is not recommended to use a cross-the-fence comparison involving the comparison of aeronautical property to non-aeronautical property, regardless if it is located on or off the airport, as the resulting valuation is likely to be highly inaccurate. That's the key. That's the highest and best use key right there. We have in my career, it's always been a struggle where people would say, well, maybe we'll just do an adjustment for the value of the aerodrome land versus the non-aerodrome land. You don't, because that's not the basis for comparison. The answer is, if you think about a trip in an aircraft, it's very simple. You don't value, if you're flying from Winnipeg to Toronto, you have a place to take off and a place to land. Why is one worth more than the other? You're in the same operation, the same business operation, and that's the key to it. Now, to put this in better perspective, think of a flight from Winnipeg to Bloodbane up north. If you looked at the land around Bloodbane, it's worth $1 an acre probably. But aerodrome land is worth more because it's based on the services that the aerodrome provides to the community, bringing in goods and services, medevac, medical support, community support. It's a different usage. And whereas then let's go back to Winnipeg and think, as land encroaches the airport and they object to it, such as the Shindico plan development, and it's true, those multifamilies will produce higher return to land, but they impact the operation of the airport. So the airport is worth less than the surrounding use. And to put it to the highest scales, think of an airport like Hong Kong, where the land values are astronomical, nowhere near based on what the aircraft volume would indicate. And that's why the FAA is saying that, is that you create your own market by aerodromes. You've got to compare one to another on the standards that they have done. Continuing on with that thought, on page 45, this is a reporting of every controlled airport in Canada. And these are the standards that are to be applied. And we looked at population first, and we ranked them in population. And you can see that Winnipeg is 17th in that factor. And then we looked at things like airport runway length. which is there's a minimum amount you want to service a heavy. Whereas, say for example, if you looked at Oshawa number 3, that can't serve it. Toronto City number 2, that can't support a heavy. The runway's too short. You couldn't even land a 737 there. You can do a business jet. But then Pearson, 11,000 feet. Winnipeg, 11,000 feet. You can do a heavy. So that we would be looking in comparison to air operations like that. The nav aid, crucial issue, because if you're bringing in aircraft, the nav aids allow you to navigate in, and all those abbreviations are just the quality of the nav aids. And essentially, the key you're generally looking for is the ILS, instrument landing system. And does your aerodrome have ILS? And Winnipeg, as you can see, we have ILS, and it's described a little bit more later on, but we have Cat 3 ILS. Cat 3, that's what the number is underneath there, and underneath Winnipeg, under VORTAC ILS, it's 3, which means that's the highest category of ILS. 1 is the lowest category. And what it does is, if you've ever come in on a snowy day in Winnipeg and you can't see out the window, well, we can land at half a mile clearance instead of maybe a mile or 2 miles visibility under a Cat 1.
Excuse me, Mr. Nico, it's not necessary though. I mean, we've already established that this is not a typical warehouse. We know that there's unique things to airports, and I think you're just joining us with a bunch of material that I don't know how much is going to be valuable in assessing. I think your main argument is already been given.
Well,
you're just ordering it down at this point.
It's foundation on how I got to where I got.
Yeah.
And you know,
this is important, I know, but
and I know you let me go on further. This is important. I like this stuff, but I respect what you're saying, and I'll call it.
Here's my course to the point where we're gonna take an easy out. I mean.
Yeah. Okay, I think the point's been made is that we're looking at the factors of comparison. Going back to the rents now, we looked at rents around the country and researched them on starting page 24. So this is a sampling of rents around the country for airside access and the various uses. We settled on the recent sales on recent rents on page 25. And what I was looking for was airside, groundside access, because that's what this has. And we had the 1935 Sergeant, that's Purelator. Sorry, no, that's not the right one. That's not on the apron. 1950 Sergeant, which is the FedEx site, and this was an older lease, and it was changed on after they put an addition on, but it was a cost recovery basis. But the rent at the time was $7.74 a foot. So this is FedEx right on. I think it's just right beside the subject, or very close to it. This is what they're getting for rent for the 37,000 feet. The next one I looked at was Hangar 4 in Southport. That's CYPG. This is operated by Red River Community College, now Red River Polytech, and their rent is $6 a foot overall. And this relates to the subject because it's governed by the same market factors as the subject, and Portage is a comparable aerodrome. Those were the sites. Now the next site on my list is the second from the bottom, is marked CYWG, 24,000 feet. That's Purelator, and Purelator have this has airside access and groundside access, but it's an older building and the rent's $4, and they're described a bit more below. Pictures of Southport, pictures of more facilities. And then my last one is on page 29. This is from, it's a typo, 2019 Sargent. 2019 Sargent is a airside groundside business park located on the Winnipeg Aerodrome, and the picture on page 29 with the red dot. It's two buildings. This is designed as a customs clearing facility. It is not an aircraft hangar, and it receives the airside on one side of the building, and it was to clear customs and then dispense to vehicles on the other side of the building. The rent rolls are provided, and the going rent there was $661 for a variety of different users. Pictures of it on page 30, and the rent roll is on page 31. The Southport one that I mentioned, Red River Polytech, page 32. I inspected this. This is a slightly older hangar. You can see by the wood trusses. And the picture of it is at the top of page 33. Bottom of page 33 is the Purolator, and this has got airside access on the other side. And the aerial of it is at the bottom of the page. It's the building that is on the left upper side with a little patch of blue on one side. And then 1950 Sargent, which was the FedEx site, and this was modified afterwards, but the modification on the lease was a cost recovery, so not a market-driven issue. FedEx just simply had the landlord do it. Now we had the four selected, and you can see that they're summarized on page 35. And the major factor is going to be tail height, ground height. What I did to calculate the adjustment was at the bottom of page 35. I took the four that I had selected, and I took their height and clear heights, not outside heights, and then factored them all up to 29 feet, which was the subject. And for that factoring, I used the Marshall and Swift manual, which is about the only source we had. And for example, the first one in CYPG, 18-foot height. If you look at the chart above at 18 feet, this would correspond to a factor of 1.086, whereas if it were 29 feet, it would respond to a factor of, I used 30 because I said 29 and a half, 1.382. So we just applied an adjustment. So we took their rents and we adjusted them all for ceiling height. And then the mean on that was $8.19 a square foot. That's what, if you look back on my page one, that was my overall rate was $8.25. That was really the bottom line, is it's looking at similar properties and similar uses. And I'll go through the next part very quickly. The page 37 are just tail heights of a particular aircraft, and you can see that how important tail height is, because without it, you're not getting into this. For example, 737's got a 32-foot, 36-foot vertical tail. And it just shows you who could actually park in this site. It's restricted. Now, one of the keys, though, is page 38, and these are aircraft movements. This sets the market, because this shows you how busy we were. Now, this is Winnipeg alone, and it shows you the total monthly movements. This is published by StatsCan, and the decline in April of 18, it was pretty much at the peak. And as a result, we were using market indicators, which would indicate at the top of the peak. And that total monthly movements involves general aviation, military, and government. The commercial movements, which is the graph below, are the aircraft who transport passengers, but the same standards apply. Lastly, I wanted to go through work we did to look at highest and best use. And I know you've had a long day, but I think this is key. Page 51 is the question everybody has on this is, well, how do we value this? And this is our highest and best use analysis. These are the uses that would be appropriate, legally appropriate and physically possible generally on this site. And you've heard you discussed most of these. Now, a military, no security, too small. Air ambulance, no vehicle access, and it's too big for them. There is actually an air ambulance on the north side of the aerodrome property operated by Stars. Small airline, it's not a bad location for a small airline. There's only 2 or 3 of them that service Winnipeg that can afford something like this. Perimeter and I've forgotten the other one. They've already got their own sites, but that was a thought. Education, yes, another good thought. There's 2 facilities in Manitoba. One is Red River Polytech in Portage, and the other is Red River Polytech on the Winnipeg on Saskatchewan Avenue. That's owned; it's not rented. Rescue, no, it's too big for their use, but it's a big use around the aerodrome. But it's they don't have the access that they need. Snow cover is where when with the requirement for de-icing, it's cheaper to rent a space for an aircraft overnight than it is to de-ice it. That's how much it costs. But there were changes made after a recent incident, and now the de-icing is required if you run out of time. So the market has gone for the snow cover facility. Brokerage, that was 2019 Sergeant. There was a change in the Clearance Act, and that business is now obsolete. So we looked at it, and there's no more demand. General aviation, there's some discussion below. General aviation is, I think you probably heard some of those earlier today on Hangar Line Road, and we had a few pictures of them on page 54. So the general aviation facilities, there were 2 major ones, and they offer services to smaller users. And it's a full service facility. They also operate the fuel dispensing on the facility, but they don't store the facilities close to the airport. And on page 56, I've drawn a line that shows that it's nearly a mile from general aviation to the airport, whereas the subject property is much closer. And you can see in the picture, no, it could not be general aviation simply for the fuel storage reason. Sorry, I lost my place here. Then lastly, the museum itself. Well, that's I'll show you later why we never even considered it as a museum. The major use is probably air freight, of some form of air freight like FedEx, Purolator. And the reason on page 51 is this is Winnipeg, and Windsor Park is where traffic from Asia to New York would cross paths with traffic from Europe to LA. And that's why people thought that Centerport was a good idea. But the problem with that is that if you're spending the money to put your goods on an aircraft to get it there overnight, you're not stopping in Winnipeg and putting them in a truck for another 5 days. So heavy air freight is out, and then there's and just the cost to carry. The courier, and that's page 52, is probably the best idea because there are numerous couriers. They all have their own facilities now, but that I think would be the alternate use, considering the floor loading and everything else that it has to offer, and it can be adapted. And education would be a secondary use. Page 53 shows the hangar for Red River Polytech that's on Saskatchewan and in Winnipeg. moving along as quickly. Page 57 was, we reviewed the highest and best uses of museum. We had access to some interesting data. Ibis World, who do the industry for museums, firstly, they've suffered more than anybody else during COVID, and that's one of the things we're showing, but they just don't make any money and they don't sell. So this is the documentation that we had from them. And then on page, as well as the tour operators, it's just not a highest and best use. Page 63, there have been 2 museum sales in Winnipeg in the last 20 years. Both went for $1. One was a Dalmavert on, which is the McDonald House, and the other was a place on Main Street, which I've never heard of, 564 Main. Dollar sale. There's no market. Our vacancies are then shown, and the planning is there. I think that's the extent of that. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that we did a fairly good analysis. Our conclusion was that this would be a good site for courier service, and coincidentally, we have 2 courier service rents. Thank you. That's my presentation.
Thank you. Ms. Lopez, any questions?
Yeah, just a couple of questions. Rocky, I can definitely see your passion for flight. You put a lot of information into there. So my first question, though, is on your page 25, I believe it is. These are the rents that you're looking at. Just right away, 2 rents that stand out to me that I think you kind of bypassed in the middle were Hangar 1 and Hangar 2. Both 50,000 square feet, 56,000 square feet, are rents at $10.95 and $9.68. You stated these are for education. And then on your page 53 for highest and best use, you said education, or on your page, sorry, highest and best use is on page 51. You stated for applicability, education is very good. I'm just wondering why you didn't use these rents.
Oh, it's fairly simple. So those are in Southport, and those were part of the contract when Department of National Defense privatized military air training. They sent out a contract, and Kelowna Flightcraft got the first contract. And part of the deal was you had to locate in a former military base, which was Southport, and reutilize it. And Southport have an aviation authority as well. So these rents were all based on amortizing over the length of the contract with the federal government, which was 20 years. So that's why the rents are higher. A normal capitalization, you tend to look at a 35 to 40 year period. These were deliberately set to recoup all costs within 20 years, and so they would have. That's why when I look at Hangar 4 above, which was not done on the same basis, that's why it's so much lower.
I guess my next question is on.
And looking at Hangar 5, which is also in Southport, that one was not done on the basis of satisfying a government contract, and that came in at $779.
Okay. Looking at your page 1, and you've broken it up into the first and second floor, but my question is why is the mezzanine valued so much lower at $6 a square foot than the main floor? Where the mezzanine, as the pictures we saw, there's an elevator to get up there, there's washrooms, change rooms, nice offices, conference rooms. It seems that would be undervalued for this property.
Well, if you note the pictures, it's empty. You need a use. That's not a highest and best use. That was built for what they deemed was important. A space where you've got this big meeting room for events, and then you don't have a kitchen that's not a kitchen next door. At the end of the day, my instinct was to even take it out of it altogether, because it's it wouldn't contribute to a future use. But I think what it would provide, and the reason at the end of the day why I left it in at $6, is I could see that facility, that courier facility, a small freight facility, needing the space for administrative purposes. But they'd have to put some money, some capital into it. It's wasted space up there. Like the pictures of the yellow and the red chairs. Look at that. It's just big empty space. I had a hard time with that.
Those are all my questions.
Mr. Mayor, do you have any questions?
I have none. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Stephen, do you have any questions?
No, that was a lot of information, but I think I got it all and I have no questions. Thank you.
I just have one question now. Mr. Nico, what does CYPG stand for?
CYPG is Southport, Portage La Prairie.
Okay.
It's the old military base.
Okay, I see. Okay. Thank you. I have no other questions. Okay, so now we'll go on with agenda item number 8. And when you're ready, Ms. Lopenstein?
Sure. I'll just do a more abbreviated evaluation of this one, or demonstration of this one, as we've already gone over many of the points. The roll number is 07569138805. 2080 Wellington Avenue is for the roll year 2023, and the reference date's April 1st, 2021. We have an assessed value of $16,491,000. I'll go down to my page 6. This is the income workup. Again, we're using $12.69 a square foot this time, applied to the same area. 3.5% vacancy, 3% expenses, and an overall capitalization rate of 6.1 for our estimated value of $16,491,000. Again, on page 5, you can see some of the rent comparables. Some of them are similar to last time. There's also one on Ellis and Scurfield and Commerce. Aside from that, all my other documentation is the same as last time. So we feel the value should be confirmed at $16,491,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Chief, do you have any questions?
I do, but I was on my soapbox for a while. Can I get a 2-minute break?
Yes, you can.
Okay, thanks.
Do you want me to put it in resource or we'll just wait for him?
We'll swap line.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to take a break too.
Caroline.
Okay, we're back and we're at the point where you're asking questions of the assessor, Mr. Hugo.
Yes, and I can assume that the questions asked and answered in the previous hearing would also be considered for this hearing. I don't have to repeat them.
No, please don't. We have on the new that came up because of new.
Anything new? That's awesome. Okay, so the first question is on your in the last workup you had a rent of $9.43 a square foot. Now it's $12.69. Are you suggesting that's the market increase?
That's correct. Yep.
And that's what the model generated?
That's correct.
And you did the model take into account the phenomenal decline in business and around airports?
No, it looked at the overall market for flex warehouses.
Okay, so non-aviation based uses then.
Correct.
And the same question then to the cap rate?
Yep.
Okay. When the model is fed this data, how do you handle the tenant improvements in the rents?
We don't consider tenant improvements. we just look for the net rents.
Well, what I mean is if someone reports rent to you and you can rent someone, can tell you an example of a building that got a $6 rent without the tenant getting a nickel, and then the building next door, you get a $10 rent because they got a few $100,000. Do you look at things like that?
Yeah, we see them when they come in, when they're reported, yes.
And do you adjust for net effective, or do you just report the face rate?
We report that we look for the contract rate or the net rent. So
the face rate.
Yeah.
Okay. So in regard to your rents on page 5, were these selected by yourself?
Yes, they were.
And the first one is retail, correct?
1777 Ellis.
Now auto parts.
Yep.
And that's a step up, isn't it?
I'm not too sure. I don't have the lease in front of me.
Okay. The next one, 15 Scurfield. Are you saying that's an industrial building?
Yeah.
Have you ever been in it?
No.
You're not aware it's an office. It was a Grand and Toy warehouse converted to office. Grand and Toy showroom, I should say, converted to office.
Yeah, but just give me a second here. It's got, excuse me, it has similar attributes to industrial buildings, such as higher wall height, and it's got the loading docks.
Where do you park the aircraft in it?
I mean, I think we've been over this, Rocky. You know how we're valuing it.
I just thought I'd throw that in. 25 Meridian. What's the length of the term? You have it listed at 4 years. That's Texcan?
I'm not too sure who the tenant is, but yes, we have it listed as a 4-year term.
Oh, was that a renewal or a step up?
I don't have that information with me.
Was it the same tenant who initially occupied the place in 2015?
If you give me a moment, I can find that out for you.
Okay, good.
So it's Sohn Park, Canada, and it's actually a 10-year. We have it in as a 10-year lease here, 2014 to 2024.
Oh, okay, that's a little closer to what I thought. So that's a step or a renewal of some sort, isn't it not?
They didn't in hand today. They did not indicate if it's a step or not.
Okay. Now, are you aware of the conditions surrounding the original lease?
Sorry, Rocky, I didn't make out what you said there.
Yeah, and you know what? I got this stupid fan that just went on. I think my speaker's picking it up. It's going away. Are you aware of the conditions on the original lease?
No, I'm not.
You're not aware that this was a built-to-suit project, cost recovery structure?
Nope.
Okay. And you're showing $13.55, but why would the business assessment only be $8.90?
Well, ours are based off the model, but we're not comparing assessments here. So,
200 Discovery. Who's the tenant here?
we don't usually like to supply that information.
It's past the date, isn't it? If they've been to hearing already. So you can't supply it, that's fine.
Just give me a moment. I have Corporate Express in here.
Isn't that a large cross-dock facility with a lot of land associated with the lease?
They don't indicate that on the mailer.
99 Commerce. I pulled the listing on that. It's listed as an office building. Are you sure that it would be considered here in the same as your subject?
Well, it's not a museum, no, but it is an industrial property or a flex warehouse property.
It was built as flex warehouse, but it's marketed as office, is it not?
I think it does have some nice offices in it, yes, similar to the subject.
Okay. I think those are my new questions, and I'll yeah, okay. Unless Mr. Mercury has anything to add.
Mr. Mercury?
No additional questions, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mercury. Mr. Mercury, do you have any questions?
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Stevens, do you have any questions?
I do not either, thank you.
And I don't either. Thank you. So, Mr. Neufeld, you can go ahead with your evidence on gender identity.
Yeah, I did have some rebuttal, and it was just to show you some pictures of the assessor's comps. On my rebuttal document, it's the same one. With actually a fourth page, I'd asked about 1777 Ellis, and this is the rent roll from, it shows you this is actually a step up. It was $7 rent that stepped up, so it was not a market lease at $9. The next page, page 5, is pictures 15 Scurfield. You know, right now it's major use is voting. I've been there several times to vote. It's office. It was a Grandin toy, but it's no longer that. It's an office building. 99 Commerce, which is listed below, and it actually says office for lease in it. That's in Terracons Park off Kenniston. Been in there, inspected it. It's office build. It's called Flex Warehouse because it's designed as Flex Warehouse. They have a standard architectural plan that has their centers and their bays, so they're all designed the same way. But this entire park is office, and that's what it's being marketed as. The Meridian on page 6. This was just a curiosity as to why the rent is listed at one thing, but it's assessed at in this case about a little under $9 a square foot.
You can build assessment says, Mr.
I understand. It was just if one is good for one purpose, I'm curious as to why it's not for the other. And I'll move on. And the last and maybe I don't know if Mr. Mercury wants to address this or not, but
yeah, I can speak to that. The last.
Yeah, I'll leave that page 12 of that.
Okay. So just the last pages of the rebuttal, in light of the assessor's use of industrial properties, particular and those parameters, including one of his comparables at 310 Debates, which was in very close proximity to a property that just recently came before the board of revision less than 2 weeks ago, and that's at 41 Paquin. And we addressed this at page, I think it's 11 or 12 of the rebuttal brief, just by way of comparison. And this is what I would suggest, kind of an overall reality check on the assessor's valuation. The property at 41 Paquin sold in 2019 for $72.51 per square foot, or $3.8 million. It's a more traditional layout industrial manufacturing facility, 52,403 square feet. That property came to appeal before this panel, and the final valuation was $4,171,000. That was the board's determination, or $79.60 per square foot. The rent that the board applied was $5.85 and a cap rate of 6.65% to arrive at that value. And so we look at the subject property and we look at the assessor's valuation and Mr. Neufeld's valuation. What we have is Mr. Neufeld coming in at $84 per square foot in the 2022 valuation and $78 per square foot in 2023. Mr. Neufeld's rent, which is he's using at $7.37 for 2023, and the same for 2022. I would suggest, particularly in relation to the Paquin property, is a very reasonable. And I would suggest that, given this is a larger facility, of course, at Wellington, but the rent at $7.37, I'd suggest would be the upper end of value. The rents the assessor is using at $9.43 and $12.69 will certainly are far beyond what I would suggest would be expected for, particularly if you're using an industrial parameters. Similarly, the cap rate that is applied, what level of risk on this type of investment, given the level of expenditures that would need to go into this property, the limited market, the pool of participants would be potential investors who are potentially interested in this property. You'd have to reflect that somewhere, and you'd have to look very carefully at the cap rate. Again, if we're using a 6.65% cap rate on 41 Paquin, which is a smaller facility, far less risky in an industrial zone, similar zoning, the cap rate at the assessor is applying at 6.1 and 6.3% respectively. My submission are far too low. You have to adjust that. So the final comment I would have is just with respect to the type of facility this is. It's, in fairness to the assessor, it is a challenging type of property to assess for market valuation purposes. But again, the test is not what the value is to the owner, but it's what it would command in the open market. Really, this facility would not exist but for the funding, the provincial and federal funding that is applied to it. That's why it exists, and so museums serve an important public purpose, but they don't. To just simply look at the cost of the facility and imagine that it was an industrial warehouse facility is really not reflective of market realities. So I appreciate that the board has to do the best it can with the evidence that it has, and I would ask that you take all of that into account when you are making your determination on this matter. So those are the only additional comments I would have with respect to the presentation provided by Mr. Phil.
Well, thank you, Mr. McCreary. So, Ms. Robinson, you can ask questions of Mr. McCreary and Mr. Nico. Just direct your questions. Who you want them to answer?
I don't have any questions on the rebuttal.
Okay, that's fine. Mr. Mayor, do you have any questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Steve, do you have any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Yeah, and I don't either. Thank you. So, Mr. Nico, go on with your main brief, and I know we heard everything before, so this cycle, please.
Yeah, well,
We can remember what you already said.
good. No, and I did that on purpose, but put him on the same report so that I wouldn't have to repeat it. On page 2 is our workup for the 2023 tax year, and it should say April 1st, 2021 reference date. That's just my typo. Now, you notice we didn't change a lot of the things on here like rent or vacancy, and the reason we didn't change rent is that aviation related properties tend to have long terms because the occupancy is based on obtaining a space on an aerodrome and long-term concepts. It's not something you can say, I got a better deal at the airport down the street. You don't. So that's why we use the same rent. All these things are long term, and the vacancy rates actually hadn't changed in Johnson. The only real difference is the cap rate, and for that, I referred to this earlier, but on page 38. As I said earlier, the valuation of an aviation related property must be done on aviation related influences, not those are the predominant ones, because it's a restricted use site. It has a market value, but it's all based on a particular endeavor. And you can see the aircraft movements. You know, you look at the date when COVID hit, and they just plummeted. We have in Manitoba a 2-year assessment cycle. That means the legislators want us to reconsider value every 2 years. Well, these 2 years were horrible, and that's what we have to do. And we don't even them out and say things will take a longer term outlook on life. It's 2 years stretches. These are bad 2 years. So the change we made was to the cap rate. It was the rents would still be in place, but the investor would not be interested in putting money in that. And as a great analogy is, look what happened to investment rates around the world on aviation related businesses. Boeing, Air Canada. I bought their stocks because they were so cheap when COVID happened. And that's the same concept as being on an aerodrome ground and renting space. The investment level would be lower. And that's our change. The value went down, not up. Now, in 2025 reassessment, it likely would rebound, and then it'll go up, and that's what we have to look at. But we have to show respect to the legislature for their 2-year window. I think that's really the major issue, and the only one I was going to bring up that differed from what I had previously presented. And I probably have a word or two to say at the end, not many, for summation. How's that for short?
That's good. Any questions, Mr. Wilkinson?
I have no question. Sorry, no questions.
Any questions, Ms. Stevens?
I have no questions, thank you.
Smith, do you have any questions?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I don't either. So if you want to make a summation, a brief summation, Mr. You can do so.
I'll wait and see if
I don't have a summation. No.
Okay. I hope you understand that I bored you all to death because this is a bit of a very high personal interest for me, and one of the things I'm doing at Colliers is actually specializing in valuation of aerodromes.
Excuse me, if you just make your summation, we don't want to hear any more. If you have,
no,
it's going to help us arrive at an evaluation, and you've already mentioned you want to sum it up, so it'll be
okay. Well,
otherwise, I don't want to hear any more.
Okay, I would like you to focus on page 44 that I've marked in the red about how do you value a property on an aerodrome. It's not by comparing it to an industrial property in St. Boniface or Fort Garry. You got to look at properties that are influenced by the same factors. We brought you rents from those. We had airside and groundside operations. That's the key here. Not some sort of an analogy trying to compare to what's happening somewhere else that's not market related. And that's the key. They're all impacted by the same restrictions on use. They're all impacted by the type of operation they are. These are physical factors, legal factors. And as Mr. Mercury pointed out, the cost to adapt this, I think that you understood that quite well. It's so astronomical, you may as well tear it down and rebuild. As far as looking at a museum, it's worth $1 because that's all they sell for. I think what we provided you is a very, very fair analysis of how this should be treated as market. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, that now completes all items on the agenda today. So we're going to now adjourn this hearing, and we're going to close this hearing, and you'll receive our decisions in due course. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, bye.
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 So, what,